is now linked. And if you take out the technology which links us, you can cause chaos. A modern virus can not only worm itself inside a computer system to see what's going on, it can take over the system. This year, the Stuxnet virus infected an Iranian nuclear power station and gained control. It was months before the Iranians realised, and it may have put back their nuclear program.
It was the most complex and sophisticated attack we've seen. It focused on industrial control systems in the Middle East. But that scenario almost rewrote the threat landscape, if you like, for us, and made us view what could happen in a new light.
Screens at Mr. Osborne's security company show the level and range of attacks going on all over the world. Each red dot, an attempt to hack a computer. Some will be by governments, other individuals, some from criminals, some from terrorists.
There are scenarios out there that really are horrifying. There are some, very good analysts who are saying an extended cybersecurity attack on the west coast of America, for example, could be the equivalent of several hurricanes all arriving at the same time.
4 X-ray Lima 4-1 and 4-2.
Air traffic control depends on computers, so do the armed forces, the electricity grid, transport, the economy. An attack on these could be considered an act of war. Conventional warfare will still be a part of the 21st century. Critics say the defence cuts means the UK will no longer be a military heavyweight. The Foreign Secretary disagrees.
Yes, we will have less of certain things, but be in no doubt we will still be able to deploy our forces elsewhere in the world. We are still entirely equipped to defend the Falkland Islands. There is no reduction in something like that.
But the government keeps repeating it'll be a first-ranking power in the context of NATO. Acting alone? That may be a different matter. Tim Marshall, Sky News.
Next, the survivors of the London bomb attacks in 2005 have criticised the delays in getting help to those seriously wounded. One injured tube passenger at Aldgate Station said he remonstrated with groups of firemen standing by the exit while people lay dying. Sky's Mark White reports from the inquest in central London.
Stranded in the tunnel between Liverpool Street and Aldgate Station, the bombed-out Circle Line train, which just hours earlier had been packed with commuters. The horrifying events which unfolded here on the morning of July 7th, 2005 were vividly relived by some of the survivors. People like Stephen Desborough, who used his first aid training to tend to the injured and the dying before the emergency services arrived.
What I went through today is absolutely minimal compared to what the families are still going through at this moment in time. At the end of the day, you can't let this day get the better of you, because the bombers have won then. And you can't have that. You cannot have that.
5 years ago, Michael Henning suffered serious facial and arm injuries in the Aldgate blast. Today he recalled his sense of anger and frustration at the slow response of the emergency services. He said he eventually made his way out of the tunnel 25 minutes after the blast and saw groups of firefighters standing around Aldgate Station. He confronted them, demanding to know why they weren't going down the tunnel to rescue the injured. They didn't reply. They wouldn't even look at him, he said, as if they were embarrassed.
Many people would have volunteered to go down there to help them, but the professionals were held back. And that's, to my mind, that's just unacceptable. And I know how much damage it's done to some of the firemen and paramedics who've had to have counselling, not for what they saw, but from the fact they were stopped from doing their job.
In all, 7 innocent people lost their lives at Aldgate that day. The inquest was read victim impact statements from their families. Lee Baisden, nicknamed Bazzer, lived for his music. His mother said Lee was one of a kind. He was loyal, sensitive, trustworthy and caring. Benedetta Chiaccia was an Italian national who'd lived in England for 10 years. She was, her family said, a beautiful, sweet Italian girl who greatly enjoyed life. Carrie Taylor had loved the arts and had been given a permanent job with the Royal Society of Arts just 3 days before her death. Her family said it was devastating that she'd only just started to reap the benefits of all her hard work when she died so tragically. Carrie Taylor was one of a number of victims who'd survived for a time after the blast, but died before proper medical help arrived. Mark White, Sky News at the 7/7 inquest.
Facebook's online security is under scrutiny again after it emerged some users' unique personal information may have been made public. Well, the site says it's working to fix the problem and insists the safety of its 500 million members remains its top priority. CBS News' Anthony Mason has more.
Facebook acknowledged today its privacy policy had been violated after the Wall Street Journal reported that some of the site's most popular applications were transmitting personal information about users to advertising and internet tracking companies.
It's an incredible amount of information.
Mark Rotenberg, head of the Electronic Privacy Information Center, said it could include biographical information, friends, even the unique ID numbers that identify the more than 500 million Facebook users.
It's a little bit like learning that the telephone service that you signed up for wasn't really able to keep your calls private.
A Facebook spokesperson said today there's no evidence that any personal information was misused or even collected, but added, we plan to introduce new technical systems that will dramatically limit the sharing of user IDs. The Federal Trade Commission warned the online advertising industry last year that it needed to clean up its act. The industry needs to do a better job of self-regulation, one commissioner wrote, or a day of reckoning may be fast approaching. This month, leading trade groups announced a new set of principles and unveiled this advertising option icon.
The intent is for it to be on every ad where data is being collected or used, and when you click on it, it tells you about the policies of the companies that are involved in the ad, and it allows you to opt out.
By taking these steps, the industry is basically acknowledging there's a problem.
I think the industry is acknowledging that they have to do better.
But Mark Rotenberg says the industry can't be trusted to police itself.
You know, the system of online privacy is pretty much broken down, and that's why we're at really a critical moment right now, probably for the future of the Internet.
Rotenberg's Electronic Privacy Information Center has filed 2 complaints against Facebook with the FTC, alleging unfair and deceptive trade practices. Anthony Mason, CBS News, New York.
While the U.S. midterms are just weeks away, with President Obama facing an electoral struggle, not only with the nation of voters still angry about the economy, but also with a resurgent right-wing galvanized by the Tea Party movement. While the poll marks the halfway point of Obama's first term in office, and one man who's been watching the progress of his presidency closely is the American civil rights leader, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, and he's been speaking to Sky's Dermot Murnahan.
He was doing a great job. When he came into office, we were losing 750,000 jobs a month. We were hemorrhaging jobs. He stopped the hemorrhage. There's been a slow recovery from the hemorrhaging of jobs, because as long as the major corporations are able to globalize capital and take jobs abroad and do offshore holding of their monies, then that slows down recovery. The banks utterly failed us because there was not oversight on the banks. We bailed the banks out, but not linked to lending and reinvestment. That became a problem. And his health care bill, a major bill in the right direction so you can get pre-existing coverage if you have, say, cancer, for example. Many students are coming out of school with guaranteed debt without a guaranteed job, and he's slowed down the student loan default. So some major things. But he's been on constant attack, and I think for the most part unfair. And if the youth and the black vote emerges with strength, on November 2nd, he'll be able to survive it.
Do you think that will counter? I mean, I mentioned there this Tea Party movement. It all seems rather strange to us here in the United Kingdom.
It is strange.
Grassroots, it's about small taxes, small government. Do you see it as having momentum or feeding into the Republican vote?
Of course it does. It's a Trojan horse. There's some other issues inside the Tea Party movement. For example, I talked with a man during the health care debate, and he said, I'm a big rebel against big government. He was from West Virginia, a state most endowed with federal funds. He had driven down an interstate highway, 90% federal government funded. He had on an oxygen mask trying to breathe, and a Social Security card in his pocket. So he was not really against the government that serves him. It was against a kind of anti-Obama mania. But President Barack has maintained all of the tough times, except the high popularity because of his vision and his integrity. He remains strong, and I think in these last 2 weeks, If the youth vote comes alive and votes its interests, not its fears, if the black vote votes its numbers, we'll be able to substantially hold on to ground that's been gained and not lose ground.
The world watched as Barack Obama was elected president as the first African American. What do you think about UK politics? I mean, when you look at our political parties, our key political parties, you don't see too many black and Asian faces there, do you?
But you see a whole lot in jail, but not many at Cambridge and Oxford. And so what is going awry? It's not intelligence, that is structural disorder. President Barack's election represents the maturing of American politics. In 1965, we marched for the right to vote in Selma, Alabama. Blacks couldn't vote. White women couldn't serve on juries. Farmers who couldn't pay poll taxes couldn't vote. 18-year-olds couldn't vote. You didn't have on-campus voting in 1965 until 1975. So in the maturing of our process, we learned to live with each other more easily, where you now have an African-American president, a woman Speaker of the House, three women on the Supreme Court. So in the maturity, we learn to relieve of unfounded fears and anxiety and do a difficult thing. We learn to survive apart. We must now learn to live together. These multicultural societies must learn, in fact, whether you are Indian, or Asian, or black, or white, we must learn to live together.
I mean, and has President Obama moved that agenda on in the United States in your book? Because there was suggestions before he was elected that you said he was acting too much like a white man.
Well, I think the real point there is that in his adjustment to the culture, he said to move the whole needle. I think he's done a good job, and I support him very much.